All right, boils and ghouls. So I'm trying to record as much as I can because I'm traveling Monday upstate for an annual fishing trip. My father and I and friends of the family and friends of mine come up to our house upstate, and none of us fish. There's like one that does some actual fishing. The rest of us just hang out, have some drinks, and party for the week, basically. But I'm trying to record a bunch of reviews and deep dives and stuff and save editing for up there. I also have to edit Poltergeist 3, that deep dive, so that'll be coming sometime, hopefully by the middle of the week or something like that. I also watched the first 40 minutes or so of The Strangers Chapter 2. I don't want to speak too soon, but it was so bad. That first 30, 40 minutes, I was not feeling it at all. And then I ended up having to go do some other things, and I was going to return to watching that and then put a review out on that. And I said to myself, that can wait, because I just did a review on this movie, Incident in a Ghostland, by Pascal Laugier, I don't know how to say the guy's name, the director of Martyrs from 2008, which I always say is one of the four big French horror, French extremity horror movement films that we got in the 2000s. High Tension or Out Tension, Switchblade Romance, Frontiers, Martyrs, and Inside. So he directed Martyrs 10 years before this movie. And then he did The Tall Man with Jessica Biel. And I haven't seen that movie in forever. I don't remember it. I don't remember it being terrible, but I don't remember it being anything great. But I did a short review on TikTok for this, and that's rare, where I do something over there on that platform where I didn't already cover the movie on the channel. So I said to myself, yeah, The Strangers Chapter 2 can fucking wait. It could sit there on the computer and wait. And I wanted to do a full deep dive on this movie because I actually really, really enjoyed this film, and enjoyed it even more so on the rewatch when I did that little review on it. So if anyone hasn't seen Incident in a Ghostland, or just Ghostland, it's also known as, it is another very disturbing French film, just like Martyrs. I don't think this film is as disturbing as Martyrs. I think Martyrs is a much more just visually assaulting freak fest. Those are the words that came to mind. Just an absolute insane trip of a film with a lot of controversial stuff in there and a lot of really violent stuff. This movie, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of brutal stuff that goes on in here too. I just feel like Martyrs still is the victor when it comes to disturbing movies by Pascal Laugier, whatever it is. But we have two teenage girls, Vera and Beth. They end up going with their mother to, I think it's the mom's sister's house. I'm pretty sure. And they inherited it after she died, and they end up moving there. The first night that they're in the house, they end up getting brutally attacked by these two people who break into the home. One is a big, ogre, to use Beth's own words later on in the movie. Dumb, weird fucker. He has something wrong with him, obviously. And then the other one is this older, weird, witchy woman, to also use Beth's words. The movie starts with a quote, I think, from Lovecraft, because Beth's character is a writer, and she, one, is very, very influenced by Lovecraft. She loves writing horror stories. Vera is the older one. She always felt like her mother loves Beth more than she loves her, because she gives a lot of encouragement, the mother, to Beth for her writing, and she really, encourages her to pursue that dream. Vera always kind of felt, and even says it early on, I know you love her more than me. And then she has a little meltdown. And I really like the character of the mother. All the performances in this movie. And there's not, a big cast here. So after these two people break into the home and end up attacking the girls, they drag Vera away. The mother ends up killing the two intruders. Obviously, the family's never the same again, but it flashes forward 16 years, and we see that Beth has become a very successful author, and she's writing, or she wrote and is just releasing, a book titled Incident in a Ghostland, which is based on that night that her mother, her and her sister went through, that traumatic event. She's going on press tours and talking about the book on TV shows. She's married, happily married with an adorable son. Everything seems like it's going okay for her, that she was able to, adapt and deal with the trauma and put it behind her as much as she could and live mostly a normal life. Whereas Vera never left the home, that house that it happened at, with her mother. They both still live there. Vera is very mentally disturbed. She never really escaped that night in her mind. She has a room downstairs, a padded room that she, stays in. She's constantly screaming and having fits, and the mother's been taking care of her ever since. And that's all you need to know going into this movie without spoilers. From here on out, we're going to get into the whole movie and everything. So spoilers, heavy spoilers. And this is a movie that is very, very easy to spoil the entire film. Just saying the wrong thing can lead to that. So if you haven't seen Incident in Ghostland, definitely check it out. It's on Tubi. I'm sure it's on other streaming services. And especially if you're a fan of Martyrs, definitely check this one out. I think this is a mostly excellent film. I have some issues, but not many. And I know this is a very divisive and split movie among fans of Pascal's work, because there was a tragedy or an accident on set that ended up leading to a controversy and a lawsuit from the actress who plays young Vera. She ended up having to do a scene where she was banging on glass, and the glass broke, and it ended up really cutting her face bad and ended up disfiguring her. And she had to get work done, and she ended up suing, I think, the production company. I don't know if she sued Pascal Laugier directly. However you say that name, it always bothers me. But just for that incident alone, I know people don't like this movie just because of that, which is fine. I mean, just like I know people who can't watch and don't like the Twilight Zone movie because of the horrific accident that happened filming that, and even hate John Landis because of that movie. Same with Jeepers Creepers with Victor Salva and Roman Polanski. Some people can separate the art from the artist. I can. Some people can't. I say that all the time. It's fine either way. But spoilers ahead. Let's jump deep into Incident in a Ghostland from 2018. I'm not positive where the story is supposed to be set here, because the mother is French. Her and the two teenage daughters, they're driving to the house that they inherited. And she speaks French to Beth. And Beth knows a little bit of French, but then Vera gets annoyed whenever her mom speaks French. Says, I don't speak French. And she's getting mad at Beth because Beth is reading a story that she wrote. And it ends with something about piss on a carpet. To quote Vera, she says, I don't understand how you sit there and write these stories that end with piss on the carpet. The only reason I bring that up specifically is because it does kind of come back around near the end of the movie. But I'm not sure exactly where they are. It seems like they're in America, but maybe they're in France. I don't know. So now that I said spoilers and everything, we can talk early on here, but we'll wait till later to really get into it. The twist, which is after the people break into the house, the first night that they're living there, which is terrible luck. The worst. Beth and Vera end up being taken in the basement. Vera ends up being raped by big ogre dummy. And Beth witnesses her mother brutally murdered in front of her. And because of her personality and her nature, she tends to always escape, and she uses stories and writing as a way to escape. So she ends up literally escaping in her mind and blocking out that her mother was killed. Everything we see from then on in the movie, all the 16 years later stuff, everything that's a flash forward, is all just in Beth's mind. She just, broke down completely from the weight of the trauma of being held captive by these two sick fucks. And her mind couldn't take it. And she's kind of just catatonic, and she is seeing things in the basement, like a picture of a guy or a portrait. That's what her husband is based off of in her, in her getaway dream. That's not the right way to put it. In the delusion going on in her mind, trying to protect herself and not completely lose her mind and her sanity. So she escapes, and everything we see is not real. It's just going on in her mind. The son too, there's a portrait of a kid. That's who her son's based off of. There's a woman who interviews her about her book, Incident in a Ghostland, based off that night. You see a picture of that woman too. I like how all of that's handled. And they even give a very, very telling clue and hint in the first, 15 minutes of this movie. When Vera goes outside for a bit, when she gets mad a lot at the beginning of this movie. And they're trying to, unpack the car and bring all the boxes into the house. She goes outside. It's before the mom comes over. And then when the mom leaves, she says, "I know you love her more than me." And she has her little breakdown. She tells her mom that something's wrong with Beth, that she, not that she's delusional, but almost saying that. She said that she found something that she wrote that is basically her pretending that she's this famous writer and this huge successful star. And it's like an interview to herself that she was writing. So it gives that hint right off the bat. And it's not something that you'll pick up on, most likely, the first watch, but it's very rewarding on a rewatch when you know the twist and what happens. I think that's another reason why I think this twist works so well for me compared to High Tension's twist, which I've done a video on and I've talked about often. The twist is terrible in that movie, especially on rewatches, because none of it makes sense. I don't want to get into it and spoil that movie if you haven't seen it, but I just don't want to get into it. That's the most important thing here. But it just doesn't make sense. It's a terribly written twist. I feel like it was just tacked on to the movie. Despite that, High Tension's a great movie. It's just the twist that brings it all down for me. Here, all the hints and clues towards it, and the way that it's handled, and the way that it's not like a, last act reveal. I think it's only 50 minutes, an hour maybe into this. Could be a little more, but it's not too late into the film where you get that reality and you get that reveal that she never left the basement and she's still trapped down there with Vera. So for me, it works completely. But she has her little meltdown, Vera, outside. They're looking around the house. There's dolls everywhere. And on their way there to the house, they stop at a gas station and they see a candy truck that follows them and is stalking them, which is the two sick fucks. But when they stop at that gas station, Beth picks up a newspaper and it says that there's been like 4 or 5 instances where a mother or a parent is killed, but the daughters are left to live. So they've been doing this for a while, I guess. But the only motive we get is when the woman says, "We just want to play with dolls." And they even dress them up like dolls later on in the movie. And honestly, they do a great job at making you care about this family in the first 15 minutes of the movie. They do a great job of developing both Vera and Beth's characters. The mom, not as much, but she's not, in the movie as much. The focal point of this film is the siblings and that they can triumph through anything. And even though they have their disagreements and Vera has her feelings towards Beth and vice versa, they can come together and overcome anything, which is ultimately what they do at the end of this movie. But we see the rest of that night unfold. One, the setting of the house, I love it. I think it's claustrophobic, but also very, it's a huge place. So it's open, but it's also very claustrophobic as well, considering also what they're going through. And the shots, too. There's a lot of great shots in this of the creepy dolls. There's one doll that comes out of like this secret It's like a Chinese puzzle box mirror, and a doll comes popping out for a little jump scare, and it reminds me heavily of Deep Red when, that creepy doll comes out of the cabinet and before the guy gets killed. And just the shot when the candy ogre, we're going with that the rest of the video. The candy ogre ends up grabbing the two of the girls by the hair and dragging both of them, and they're both screaming, and they get dragged downstairs, and then Vera gets dragged off and the door's shut after them. So assumably she gets raped, which they don't show, which good. This is also another little detail that adds to my point about how different this twist is handled from High Tension. It's not the same twist, but close enough. And the twist we get here, yeah, you can argue that it's been done so many times that it's almost like it's all a dream, which in a way it is because it's all in her mind, but I don't think you can just discredit it that easily in this case, because the themes of trauma in this movie and how it affects people differently and how they deal with grief and guilt and loss is explored in two ways in this film. One, just the escapism, like I was saying with Beth, how she literally just escapes the situation in her mind and fabricates this whole future fantasy world that she lives in, that everything turned out great for her, as great as it possibly can. Her mom's still alive. Her sister's the one that's not doing well and hasn't handled this well at all since that night. That's her whole delusional fantasy. But then we see how she's dealing with the trauma of that night when she's an adult. Even though it's not really happening, we still see that theme explored excellently throughout the film, because she comes out of that night, she's having a nightmare. She wakes up from this dream about that night. So I also like that it's framed that way, that it's not just, 16 years later after that night ended, because that also makes the twist work even better, because she's waking up out of a nightmare recounting that night. So the detail where her mom doesn't get killed, which is what happens in reality and what she blocks out, her mom's the hero that night. Her mom brutally stabs the, candy ogre to death. That looks pretty good. And then the witchy woman starts running at the mother from behind, and she shouts out to her mom, Beth, says, "Mom, look out," and she ends up stabbing the woman in the throat. And as soon as she does that, her eyes open in, the future, in her delusion, and she rolls out of bed and she's screaming. So obviously she has terrible night terrors. Her husband's used to dealing with this. He's very supportive of her. So even though she has these issues, she still was able to overcome a lot of it and become successful. So even though it is, all in her head and kind of it was all a dream and it never happened type of twist, it still works for me 100% because of how well it's done, how well it's handled, how well it's hinted at, and just all the themes explored during that whole section of the movie where we think that we're seeing the actual future events and what happens after she grew up. Her son, she's hugging him in the scene, and he has this, not clown, but like a Perot type, outfit on, costume. And when we see her break out of her delusion later in the movie, and she sees the portrait of the man who represents her husband, that's what the boy is dressed up as. It's like a little boy dressed as a clown, like a Perot. So then Beth ends up getting a call from Vera, who's saying, "Come back, Beth. Don't leave me alone, Beth, or come back to me." So Beth ends up calling her mother. The line's busy. So obviously she gets very worried and nervous. She ends up going and taking a trip back to that house where it all happened and checking on her sister and her mom. This is where we see Vera is not well at all, to say the least. She is living in just terrible conditions, and it's by her own choice. Her mom's trying, giving her all to her daughter, trying to get her out of this night in her mind, to help her in any way possible. And she always has these crazy fits, and the mom's just used to it, and she's used to dealing with it. And it seems like she drinks a lot, because every scene when the mom's alive here, like in the future, she's drinking something, and who can blame her having to deal with that? Beth even asks her, how do you do it? And I love the dynamic between Beth and her mother. I love the dynamic between the siblings, obviously. And I love the dynamic between Vera and the mom, even though you don't see as much of that, because one, in reality, the mom gets killed, early on. And when we go back to the basement, she's out of the picture. So you don't really see Vera with her. And then all the delusion stuff here, Vera's out of her mind. So you don't see much of a personality there in order to have, a loving dynamic or an organic dynamic with the mom. It's hard to describe. It's not a focal point of the movie. And it already has been established that, not that she really does love Beth more, but that's how Vera feels. So I guess that's another reason why he didn't spend as much time fleshing out Vera and the mom's, dynamic and relationship. And I just love the way that the line between reality and her delusion starts really blurring as it gets towards, it's early on. It's like the hour mark or so, where she ends up, being snapped out of it and coming to when she's back in the basement, and she never left. It's still that night. Because I don't remember how long it took me to realize or guess the twist when I first saw this, because I just saw this movie a few years back, and I can't remember exactly when. I knew I had my suspicions that was exactly what was going on, but I don't remember exactly when I said, that's 100%, all right, this is what's going on. She never left. We're in the basement still. But I like a lot of the hints that are thrown in, where you see Vera and she's completely naked and she has bruises on her and she just looks battered. Her eye looks swollen. She's telling Beth, don't leave me alone. And they burn me. And when I cry, they beat me, and just all this terrible shit. The real disturbing parts are after you've seen this movie for the first time and you know the twist and you know the reality of the situation. Every time in her delusion, but in, the future, where she's with her mom, and any time that you hear Vera screaming like she's being brutalized and screaming like a maniac, or just straight up you see it when she's dressed up like a doll and she starts getting smacked back and forth in the hallway, and she falls to the ground, and then her wrist or something on her hand gets like broken and twisted, which she sees that on Vera's actual hand, when she comes out of her delusion. But every time that you hear Vera screaming, you know that God knows what is happening to her and being done to her in reality, that it's bleeding through Beth's delusion. Because she's there in the basement. She could be off in her little fantasy world that we're seeing all she wants. She still somehow is hearing, obviously, what's going on around her. So anytime she hears the screams of her sister and the brutal agony, and like I said, who knows what they're doing to her? Because the guy, even the candy ogre, he has this weird thing that he does. And earlier on in the movie, they make a quick point and show a quick little scene where Beth gets her period for the first time. That's how you know Vera is older than Beth, because the mom says, oh, she's like you now, meaning Beth is like Vera. So she gets her period, and then when the candy ogre, can't take the name seriously, especially with the context of the movie, but we have fun here. He ends up lifting her up, and he smells, their crotch area. And he's instantly disgusted by Beth because she just had her period. Then he lifts up Vera, does the same thing, and makes a disturbing, like satisfied growl almost. And that's when she gets dragged off into the room. He does this again later with a doll. And he also does it again with Beth near the climax of the film, when they're in the room full of dolls, before all the dolls start talking, and then you kind of hear the voices inside of this dude's head. They're all saying he's a fucking loser and everything. So he obviously, like I said, has major issues. But he does the same thing. And when he's holding her upside down, she pees on the floor. That's why I mentioned real early on about that quick little thing in the car with her story and Vera's comment about, spending days like this writing stories that end with piss on the floor. That is brought up in a way and referenced again. I think that's clever. It's just piss on the floor, yeah, but still. Just the fact that he worked that in as a parallel between her story we hear early on and, almost the end of her story. Even though this movie does center around the sibling relationship with Vera and Beth, I do really like all the mother and daughter stuff going on between Beth and her mom, both in reality before she dies and in her own delusion, where basically her mom, and in her delusion, her delusional version of her mom, this gets very confusing, but her perfect quote-unquote version of her mother that she sees and talks to in her delusion doesn't want her to get hurt either. The point at the beginning of the movie where reality and her delusion splits, in the delusion, her mom doesn't die, she's the hero, but in reality she does. Even before she gets killed, she says right to Beth, run away. She flat out tells her to run away and to escape and go somewhere in your own head where it won't destroy you. So everything to do with the mom and Beth and their dynamic, I really, really like that in this. And what they do to the mom, man, it sucks. It looks great, but it sucks. They stab her like multiple times real fast. That doesn't look... It's supposed to be stabbing in the chest multiple times. They slit her throat really viciously. Well done effects. Then you have that cool scene where it looks like Vera is being slapped back and forth and abused, but nobody's there. She's dressed up like the doll. So the mom says, I'm going to call an ambulance, and then she says, I'm going to go wait by the main road so they don't miss the road because they're in a rural area. And that's the last time, I'm pretty sure, that we see the mother in Beth's delusion before she's broken out of it. And this is where everything is basically revealed. She's alone in the house. She's walking around. She's starting to hear voices and sounds, and she knows something isn't right. She goes downstairs and starts asking Vera what happened, what she did to her, because she's young again. And that's when reality hits her. And Vera basically says, for once in your life, stop running away. Just face what happened. Mom died. She was killed. The whole way that Beth breaks down. Oh, it is such a gut punch. It is so tragic just knowing that she had some semblance of hope in her mind and to have it all ripped away. And not just this one time for Beth. It happens again to both of them when they briefly escape and then get taken right back to the house. That's just evil. When she comes out of, her whole delusion and she's back in the basement and she's fully conscious again. She knows what's going on. That's when we see her staring at all the clues and all the stuff that made up her delusion. The portrait of her husband, the portrait of the little boy dressed as a Perot being her son, and the interviewer woman or reporter, whatever she is. And we also see that Vera's hand is really broken in the way that it gets broken in that scene where it seems like it's happening to her from nobody. Oh, also, there's a really cool kind of jump scare. It's the closest to one you really get in the movie before the big reveal where Beth is alone in one of the rooms of the house. And then she stands up and she says, Mom, and calls out to her when she hears the sound. And then the creepy woman, witchy woman, grabs her from behind. And it's kind of like a little jump scare moment. That's well done. That's cool. The sound design's really good in this. The music and the score is really good, and especially I like the usage of some classical pieces throughout this. This movie should be talked about a lot more than it is right now. I feel like this is such an underrated film. I also think it's kind of cool and interesting that when Beth first breaks out of it, she blames and hates her sister. She's screaming at Vera, "I hate you, Vera." That's one thing that I can nitpick a little bit and criticize. Some of the dialogue doesn't sound that natural in this movie. And I don't remember if the tall man had the same issue, but maybe it's just because, he's French, Pascal Laugier, and it's an English-speaking movie. Maybe it just didn't translate well, some of the dialogue, but some of it does sound a little hokey at times. But it's not a big deal at all. I think it is interesting that she does hate her sister for it, even though Vera did nothing wrong at all. I could still see her argument. Even if it wasn't real, she was still in a safe space, and she was broken out of it. And now she blames her sister. Then you have the whole climax scene when Vera basically tells Beth, don't cry, don't scream, no matter what they do, don't do anything, and just let them do it. Candy Ogre, that name it, ends up taking Beth into a room filled with dolls, and she's made up like a doll. And really cool imagery throughout this whole sequence. Then Candy Ogre ends up picking up an actual doll. I don't know if he's blind or he's just stupid, right? He doesn't know it's a doll until he does the sniff test. Then he does the blowtorch test where he has it looks like a blowtorch, and starts like melting the hand of the doll. That's when he realizes it's not screaming in agonizing pain. So he ends up throwing a little fit. And then he does get Beth on his lap, and then he tries to grope her, and she, makes a fit, and he smacks her to stop her. And while she was sitting, waiting for him to come in the room, she took what looks like a hairpin off one of the other dolls, and she stabs him in the neck. And after a whole scuffle, she gets out of the room. Her and Vera escape, just for them to run into a pair of cops, and bam, both of them are shot dead, one right in the head. That looks really cool. And they get thrown in a car and driven right back to the house. But thankfully, when the cops were alive still, one was able to call in the address. I think it was the gas station attendant recognized the description the cops were giving about Beth and her sister and her mother, so they know what house to go to. So another cop ends up at the house and kills Candy Ogre, and then a woman in basically cop-assisted suicide gets killed. The cop tells her mad times, don't move, don't fucking move, and she, of course, moves and walks towards him and gets plugged. And the siblings reunite, and they're taken away on a stretcher, and that's the end. One more thing, because this is stupid. Before that ending, Beth retreats back into her delusional world, and she's at a party. Her mom's there, and then you see H.P. Lovecraft himself come up to her and sit down next to her and say, "I read your book. It's a masterpiece. If you change one word from that book, I'll never speak to you again." And she's like smitten. All of that's fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I don't care for any of that. But besides that, and the little bit of dialogue here and there that doesn't sound that organic, I think this is such an excellent movie and such an underrated one. But that is Incident in a Ghostland from 2018. I will be traveling upstate tomorrow, but I will hopefully have out a video, spoiler-free review on The Strangers Chapter 2. It was terrible. Hope everyone's having a good morning, afternoon, or night. I will talk to you soon. Take care, guys.